Kia ora and welcome to Sobriety Chat. I am your host, Lotta Dann. I am the community manager and content creator here at Living Sober. And today I'm joined by my friend, Tommy Livingston. Now, Tommy is a husband, he's a son, friend, he's an uncle, a writer, a counsellor, a runner sometimes, and he is sober. Welcome, Tommy.
Kia ora, Lotta. Thanks for having me.
Kia ora, and thank you for getting up early on a Saturday morning to do this.
Only for you.
That's right. Only for me and the people at Living Sober who really enjoy these chats and hearing about people's journey, to use that cliched word, road to recovery and removal of alcohol. So
Mm,
tell us a little bit about your story. What led to you giving up drinking? What was your relationship with alcohol like?
Yeah, I've been reflecting on this, knowing that this chat was coming up, and I suppose for me, the story does begin quite young, when I was a teenager, growing up in rural New Zealand, and that was when my first sort of experiences of alcohol um, were in woolshed parties on farms, and I remember quite vividly, sort of, I suppose, after one of these parties, talking to some friends at school, and I felt really unsettled by the way alcohol made me feel when I drank it. And I knew that, everyone was drinking too much, and being silly. But I just had the sense that my experience was different to other people's. And I said to my friends, I think that there's something different that happens when I drink compared to when you guys drink. And they thought I was crazy, this being sort of dramatic and emotional,
What
whatever.
age were you then?
I would have been about 16 or 17.
Wow.
So I had a quite early on this inkling that when I drank alcohol, it sort of just did something. It put me into a different space that was sometimes really good. But I think what scared me was I knew that I didn't really have control, when I was drinking. It sort of was always, one was never really felt like enough. And so, I sort of matured. I went to university. I studied journalism and then got a job as a reporter. And I think throughout that time, I probably had a similar experience with alcohol as a lot of young Kiwis, just trying to navigate moving from school into university, then into the workforce. And I think for me, the story with alcohol is not so much for me a story of excess, it is a story of control. So it wasn't, when I look back, like I was drinking, every single day, or even every weekend. It was more that when I did drink, I felt like there was this battle where it was always saying to me, have another,
Mm.
and I just really didn't like that.
So hang on, can we just go back to that initial feeling you had when you were a young man,
Mm,
of feeling unsettled was the word you used. And
yeah.
I get that feeling of that pull, like I want more, I want more. But what
Mm.
else was going on internally for you that made you feel unsettled, do you think?
Felt like almost like I had an energy sort of when I drank alcohol, sort of pulsating throughout me. Like it sort of, it just did something to me that I thought, I don't think this is the experience of other people. When I talk to my
Mm.
friends and say, do you feel like this when you drink? Do you feel like, they've got this energy and this sort of, yeah, like it sort of almost like your world opens up in a quite a threatening way.
So
And
not a pleasant energy.
not always pleasant, no. Sometimes it was nice to take the edge off things, but it actually, for me, it felt really uncomfortable because it came back to this idea of like, I just knew that I didn't have control. And it
Mm.
was putting me in this different space, which was, at times, like I say, it was enjoyable, but a lot of the time it was a bit scary,
Mm.
Um,
But yet you kept on drinking through those early 20s or whatever.
yeah.
Because why? Because it's just the way we do things around here, or
I don't even think the idea of sobriety crossed my mind. It wasn't an option. I didn't know anyone that didn't drink, That was just that seemed nuts to me. And so, yeah, I continued to drink, and I think as I sort of matured, what tended to happen was I would always be in this constant what felt like a battle of moderation. So, although I wasn't drinking a huge amount, when I did drink, I would have to put in a lot of energy to try and hold myself back. And I got quite good at that, of trying to hold myself back, but often what would happen is there would be these periodic sort of blowouts, and I would drink too much, and that would be really upsetting for me because that's not how I actually wanted to live, and often I would say things, or you just have that anxiety the next day where you're like, oh, this isn't actually the person that I want to be.
Mm.
So then I would
And
get
what
back in.
you're Oh, sorry, I was just gonna say what you're articulating so brilliantly is that inside conflict. And,
Mm,
so often we look for the outward markers of a problem. You're not
yeah,
coping with life, you're crashing your car, or you're just the guy that's always blotto in the corner at parties. But for you, the impacts were really internal, but no less dramatic because of that internal struggle. And it sounds like a huge amount of effort you were having to make to
yeah.
control this liquid constantly and not feeling good about it. And yet the madness of the world we live in still consuming.
That's right, and I think that was probably one of the reasons why it was tricky for me to come to a conclusion that alcohol was a problem, because we have these ideas around what a problem drinker looks and sounds like, and, I suppose a heaving recycling bin every Wednesday morning is one of those things, right? And that wasn't me, so every time I sort of did begin to consider, "Is this an issue you need to think about?" I would sort of always come to the conclusion, well, I haven't hit some kind of crazy rock bottom. You
The
know, I
old rock bottom.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would often then sort of convince myself that, well, I'm okay. I just need to continue with this moderation and,
Mm.
being careful. But eventually, that just became very tiring for me. And
So what happened then that
yeah,
finally you came to this, I could
mm,
actually stop altogether?
yeah. I think like most people who have sort of come to this conclusion, there's a number of factors that were at play that sort of came together around the same time that gave me the agency and the foresight and the clarity, where you can actually just all of a sudden the clouds part and it becomes blindingly obvious that you should have made this decision. So a couple of things happened. One was I was working as a reporter for 5 years and covering a lot of crime, doing a lot of court reporting, and I found that work to be taking a toll on me emotionally, and on my mental health. I'd gone through at the same time quite a good counselling journey with a counsellor that had been really profound for me and healing in a number of ways. And so I felt like I was dissatisfied in my work, and I was wanting to sort of continue on my journey of healing and understanding myself more. And alcohol just didn't fit well into that picture. And I suppose when you spend enough time, covering homicide trials, you realize a couple of things, for me at least. One was that life is very fragile and temporary, and that, we all are sort of here, not to sound grim, but, we have a limited amount of time to make, to live the life we want to live. And then secondly, it was that I just realized I wasn't having the impact that I wanted to have in the world. And so I decided to step away from journalism and do a master's in counseling, which at the time for a lot of people in my life, including me, was a big shock because I was doing quite well in my career. I had a lot of external affirmation, and it was part of my identity. But I chose to undertake this counseling degree, not really knowing where it would take me, or sort of what my life would look like. But that was at the beginning of 2020, and obviously we went into lockdown and COVID and da da da. But like most people during COVID, I spent a lot of time thinking about my life and what I wanted life to look like when we were able to emerge from lockdowns. And alcohol became sort of, yeah, very, very obvious to me that something had to change there. Something had to happen. But I didn't know what I should do or how I should do it. So I didn't actually tell anyone or talk to anyone about it. I just kept it quiet, between myself and just sort of contemplated the idea of what would it be like if I stopped drinking. I went out for a meal with my wife Brooke and my best friend Jahan, and we were celebrating something. And I remember during that meal that I thought, this may be the last time that I drink. And I didn't say anything, but I just had my 2 glasses of red wine and, yeah, sort of in my own way said goodbye to alcohol then,
Oh,
but didn't say again, didn't tell anyone, didn't say anything to Brooke. the week later, Brooke and I went to Queenstown, and usually on our holidays, Brooke's not a drinker. Usually on our holidays, I would have a couple of beers or whatever, but I said to her before we went down, I'm not going to drink this weekend, and she was really stoked by that, which was probably a good indication that
Mhm.
something was wrong. And I read your book in like a day and a half. Just sat on the couch and read your book, and by the end of it, I just knew that I would never drink again, essentially, and I had to make the call. And so I went out for a walk with Brooke that afternoon, and I said to her, "This is what I'm thinking." And yeah, she got really emotional about the prospect of a life without alcohol, and I just knew if it meant that much to her, then it was definitely going to
A
happen.
good emotional, not an upset.
Yeah, a very good emotional. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
okay. I
yeah,
thought she
yeah.
was like, "Oh, the fun's gonna stop."
No,
Um,
no.
I love your story, Tommy, and it's making me feel quite emotional myself, and that may be because I'm exhausted, but it may also be because, and we hear these stories and it sounds like, it's a story and you're telling it well, but the feeling when you inhabit those decisions and
Yeah.
you move through that, it is so monumental. You actually can't overestimate it. You're making a really huge decision for the rest of your life,
Mm,
to be raw every day and not use that drug that everyone else is using to take the edge off or enhance the celebration or whatever. It is such a big thing. And so, yay for you. I just feel, you've obviously got a huge drive in you to be authentic and to be the best you can be and to realize that alcohol just wasn't serving you in any way is really special.
thank you. I mean, I think for those people that are contemplating giving up alcohol in the early stages, is that if you do have that clarity and you can you have a little bit of foresight and you can see that actually this will ultimately add to your life, as scary and as hard as that may feel, you have to just take that opportunity and just run with it. Like, I think if you get that moment where you can all of a sudden almost, yeah, see into the future, and that future looks brighter than your current situation, then you just have to trust that vision. um, there's an email that I found when I was thinking about talking to you. I was wondering if I'd written anything down at the time to sort of jog my memory of how it felt. This is an email I sent to my friend Jahan. It must have been just after I decided. And this is just a part of it. I say, on reflection, I felt this year a growing sense of dissatisfaction when it comes to alcohol. I love having a drink still, but I think deep down I have known that it can't be for me. It is exhausting to always have to be monitoring myself around alcohol and wondering whether there is the possibility that things will escalate. My blowout last month was a good reminder that I will drink to excess in the right circumstances. Moderation this year has been good, but the voice of alcohol has continued to be an enticing force in my life. It feels like I have been walking a dog, which is too strong for me, and it wants to keep running away. I'm sick of walking it, and I just want to let it go and move on to other things.
Mm,
Given all of that, I feel ready to seriously try and stop drinking for good. This is obviously like
amazing.
real hard for me to read that, because it was, at the time, such an emotional decision. Grief, I suppose, is how you sort of feel in
Yeah,
those early days.
yeah. And just fear because we do live in a culture that celebrates alcohol and emotions are powerful. And
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I used alcohol to suppress my feelings. And
Mm,
taking it away meant that I couldn't do that anymore, and that was a whole big journey that we don't need to go into now. But I'm really interested in talking to you about, your career change. And I want to start this by asking, did your counsellor that you said you'd been through your own counselling journey that had been
mm,
quite profound, did your
yeah.
counsellor ever talk about alcohol with you?
Yeah, he did. And I suppose the difficult thing, right, is that sometimes we struggle to be honest with ourselves. And so in that counseling journey, I don't think I had the insight to actually understand how problematic it was. So we definitely talked about it, and he encouraged me that I should not have alcohol as part of my life, but I didn't quite have the realization then. You know, it was the beginning, I suppose, the sowing of some seeds that you know, a few months later we saw sprout. But it wasn't in the counselling that I decided that I would stop
Mm.
drinking.
And okay, so tell us about your shift to being a counsellor yourself. And you said you did a master's of counselling. You went through those 3 years of study. I think it's 3 years. Um, and now you're working as a counsellor. How much does your recovery, if I don't know if you use that word with your sobriety at least, inform the work you do with others now? And could you imagine yourself doing it if you were still
Mhm.
having this internal sort of tug with
No,
alcohol?
not at all. And that was that was a big motivator as well. When I was studying, the first year you don't have any clients face to face. It's in your second and third years that you start to sit down with people and do therapy. And I realized that there was no way that I could, with integrity, sit down with somebody who was struggling in their life and pretend like I had any authority or tell them to do something that I wouldn't do myself. I can only lead people as far as I'm willing to go. And so, yeah, there's no way I could do what I do now if I was drinking. This is hands down no way. In terms of therapy, I mean, therapy has taught me a lot about being sober, and being sober has taught me a lot about therapy, in the sense that, I know when someone comes into my office and we sit down and we talk and they're dealing with addiction, because I've gone through my own journey, I am able to have a level of empathy and insight that I just would not have been able to have. And similarly, because I have had to give up something and the struggle of how that feels and the pressure you feel from other people and the expectations you feel on culture, I also know as a therapist to treat them kindly and gently, and we just take one small step at a time. And yeah, but eventually, all of a sudden they're taking huge strides, which is incredibly rewarding to see.
Are you loving your work as a counsellor?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, there's no other job like it in my mind. Each day I get to sit down with people and hear their story. And, some of those stories are heartbreaking, some of them are inspiring, but I'm always struck by people's courage to go on a journey of healing and to try and make sense of their life and to try and find ways to forgive and to try and find ways of um, working through their trauma or whatever it is. And I often think at the end of the day, okay, so what actually is therapy? Like what happened today? How did it happen? And there's part of it that is me, and then there's part of it that's the client, and then there's this part of it which I feel is just kind of magic, where just something tends to happen. And when you're there when that happens, it's amazing when someone has a breakthrough or an insight, and you know those moments are incredibly powerful, and that's the fuel in the tank that keeps me going.
Mm.
Yeah.
There can still be some hesitation from people to go in and sit in a room with someone and talk about their stuff. And,
Yeah.
you do hear stories of, oh, I went to a counselor and it was terrible. They didn't get, and I always try and say, just because you met with one person, it didn't go well, they probably just weren't the right fit, try again. But it can be quite hard for people, I think, Tommy, to one, make the decision and the step to go and spend some time
Mm.
really unpicking stuff with someone they don't know yet. And
Yeah.
then two, to find the right person. What
Right.
would you say to people who are maybe thinking, I really do need some proper help, unpicking, if that's the way to put it, some stuff
Mm.
that's gone on for me, but they're
Yeah.
hesitant.
Yeah. I think therapy is really great. I mean, but you have to, I think first thing is you have to be, I suppose, ready yourself. So if you feel like you're ready, then that's the first step. I don't think sometimes people often come in to see me, occasionally, and they say, I'm here because my wife told me to come. And then I say, well, do you want to be here? And sometimes they'll say no, and then we sort of have to then go, well, is now the right time to sort of start this? Because you can't sort of force someone into a healing journey. So first thing is, if you feel like it's the right time, then that's really awesome. Secondly, what you said is that I always say to a client that's new that, the first session is kind of like trying on a new pair of shoes. You just kind of need to see if this is going to be a good fit. And a lot of the time people are really comfortable, but sometimes it's just not for whatever reason, and that's totally okay. I think third is, when you go into a session, just be really clear about what you want to talk about. It's your time. And so sometimes as counselors and therapists, we can go quite broad in our approach. And, I always try and remind my clients that you just tell me what it is you want to talk about and we'll focus on that. So sometimes I think that helps to give the client a sense of clarity and feels like they're moving towards their goal, and, that kind of thing. So, but overall, particularly if you're early on in your sobriety journey, talking to someone can just be such a help. Not everyone in your life can understand what you're going through, and not everyone's able to have those conversations with you. So if you feel like that's something you need to do, then I'm obviously a huge advocate for it.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about men in New Zealand in particular. You're obviously, or I shouldn't say obviously, but I know you identify as male with using your he, him pronouns. Um, and, we have a culture of booze in this country, as a
Yeah,
lot of Western countries do. But what do
yeah,
you think are the issues for men, particularly with drinking, and the particular pressures or the ways that maybe things are approached
yeah.
between men?
Yeah, and this is something I thought a lot about as when you stop drinking, right, you try and just reach out for any resource that's possible. So I was listening to all the podcasts, trying to read all the books, and just to get a sense of how do I get through this. And what I realized was quite early on is a lot of the resources were quite geared towards women, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. I think the more resources out there for women, the better. But I do think that in New Zealand we have a bit of a gap there for resources for men who are thinking about giving up alcohol. I think it's tricky in New Zealand, right? Because we have this still a culture of sort of being macho men, and sort of when we've got problems, we go down to the pub and we have a drink and we sort of talk it out in the context of alcohol. And I found that tricky as a male to sort of realize that actually a lot of these conversations, these deep and meaningfuls that we have with our mates, often alcohol is involved. And so I think, one of the things I would love to see is more resources, but also men talking more openly. And we're seeing this a little bit more with some more high profile people coming out, like Guy on Espiner talking about his journey with alcohol, Patrick Gower. But I think more of a more nuanced conversation around what it means to talk about our feelings and our emotions without alcohol being in the picture. And also, I think just having more awareness that a lot of alcohol advertising is targeted towards males as well. And we think about sports and that kind of thing. So yeah, I hope that as we continue to have this conversation, we can also become more aware, in particular, and support men that may think that they want to give up alcohol. And yeah, hopefully this conversation is helpful, and that other conversations continue to be
Mm.
had.
The paradox with alcohol is that we feel like it bonds us. We use it as a bonding agent. Let's have a drink. We come together, whether it be at pubs or at home, and we use that moment of connection with the booze. And it
Mm,
can feel quite warm and connected. But
yeah,
over, the course of the one drink, two drinks, three drinks, it's doing the opposite. It's putting a
yeah,
shield in between your real raw self,
mm,
which is where the truth lies,
mm,
and the other person. And so, I always try and say, and you've probably heard me say this, that you can still meet in the pub, meet in the house, have the
mm,
drink. Just the liquid in the glass doesn't have to be
yeah,
that drug
that's
that
right.
alters the chemicals in your brain. You can still have the bonding moment without that particular liquid, but it's just so embedded that it is seen as the way, and the marketing sells it as well. The mates, the old spates and all the rest of it, marketing really pushes, and it's so hard to shift people's awareness of that. Do you think we're shifting at all with our awareness of how harmful this drug can be and how it
Mm.
disconnects rather than connects?
You know what? I think even in the time that I have been sober, which is sort of 2.5 years, what I have realized is that more people are comfortable with people not drinking. There are more non-alcoholic options available for people, and that people, I think, are starting to wake up to the idea that alcohol often does not add anything to their life. It tends to only take away. And so I've been pleased and surprised, and my journey has almost become easier as I have continued, because there's been a sort of more people becoming aware of the cost of alcohol. And I think what you said before is really interesting around sort of the emotional side of it, because actually for me, and what I think for a lot of people this is about, is learning to live alongside your emotions in a healthy way. Often we turn to alcohol because we just want to take the edge off. And essentially what that means is that we want to somehow numb what we are feeling. And that's a big part of counseling, right? Is, working with my clients and also with myself to learn to live alongside anxiety and to live alongside depression, or, imposter syndrome, or feeling like you're a bad mum. Like those feelings, they can come and they can go like the weather. And it's just about learning to, I suppose, dress for the weather as opposed to change it with this alcohol that may work temporarily, but long term and short term just does not actually create any benefit.
Oh, you see, this is where your skills as a communicator are really benefiting your work as a counselor, because being able to say things about emotions being like dressing for the weather instead of trying to change it is just the most beautiful metaphor. Is it a metaphor? That's really powerful, Tommy.
Thank you.
Okay, before we close, I could keep talking to you, but I won't
Yeah.
on this wet Saturday morning. How are you feeling now looking into a future with no alcohol in it? Do you ever have any moments of like, oh, I won't be able to celebrate my, you know, this, that, or the other in the future without champagne? Or do you have no, what are your thoughts about your future with no alcohol?
I'm so grateful that I made that decision. Like every day, I probably, now that I'm sort of 2.5 years in, I take for granted in some ways the decision, because it's just become part of normal life. I think, in that first year, I was just counting each day, then each week, and then, getting through each month, and getting to a year was this huge milestone. I would never go back to alcohol. I would lie if I wasn't saying that there are days where thoughts come into my mind along the lines of, oh, you could just have one, it wouldn't hurt, or, it wasn't ever that bad. And I think that's normal to have those thoughts. And for me, I just return to my values. I return to, who I'm choosing to be in the world, the kind of person that I want to be. And alcohol just can't play a role in that. There's just no way that it adds anything to my life. And I'm not the alcohol police. I still go to pubs and parties, and I have so much fun and enjoy my life. And I'm not, too interested in sort of converting anyone. Although I just sort of think that if I just allow my life to speak volumes, and, I've been privileged to have people in my life cut back on their alcohol or stop drinking, and bring me in on that journey. And that's hugely rewarding as well. So for me, no, alcohol will not play a role in my life going forward. And my life is the better for it. And yeah, it's something that will be part of my legacy, I hope, that I leave, that yeah, I lived a life of emotional sobriety. Yeah.
Mm. Mic drop. Lip gloss drop. Thank you,
But
Tommy.
thank you. Can I quickly just say as well, just quickly, for anyone that's just out there that, yeah, is in those hard early days, is that, like, trust that it will get better, because it does. It genuinely does. And find a friend that doesn't drink, and buddy up with them. And yeah, like, listen to podcasts and find something that works for you, whether it's running or walking or drinking tea. And just keep going, because it is totally worth it. And there'll be days where you feel like you can't, but you totally can. There's support out there. Don't be a ghost on Living Sober, post. And yeah, just there's help there and support. So just engage.
Uh, Awesome. I'm so pleased I met you. I'm so pleased you rang
Mm,
me up to interview me. That's how we met.
mm,
Maybe I'll post a link to that article.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, true.
Oh, no, just great, Tommy. Thank you so much. Thank you for coming, doing Sobriety Chat. Thank you for doing another guest post for us that I will post the link to as well so people can find it. Keep up the great work counselling. If it's okay with you, maybe I could share where people could find you as well.
Yeah, totally.
Awesome. So big ups to you, lots of love, and bye bye.
Thanks, Lotta. Thanks so much.